Chapter 5. This is it, sports fans. This is Ravenel, the colonel said, talking more to himself than to his family. And to think I mistook it for Paris, France, Marianne whispered to Ben in the rear of the station wagon. They were riding down a street lined with sharply spined palmetto trees. To the right of the car, the last fingers of a tidal creek groped among the extreme frontier of marsh grass that edged up against the back of gas stations and hamburger stands. Yes, it's a military town, all right, Lillian said to her husband. Half the town is liquor stores to keep the Marines happy. The other half is covered with mobile home salesmen to cheat the young enlisted men with families out of their pitiful salaries. This isn't the good part of town, so there's no sense yapping, Bull muttered. They came to a traffic light. To the right stood a decaying high school with a grassless campus. Behind the school was a garbage dump perched on the edge of a dying marsh. The school had an empty, dried-out look, like the shell of a June bug on the bark of a tree. If that's where we're going to school, you can forget it, Popsy, Marianne blurted out. That's the colored high school, Marianne. Looks terrible, Matthew said. That's where the spear chuckers learn to blow darts, the colonel laughed. Will you hush, Mrs. Meacham warned. They turned the corner and soon were driving along a high, grassy bluff that sloped down to a glistening river that flowed through the main part of town. Live oak trees festooned with cool scarves of Spanish moss and gnarled by a century of storms loomed over the street. On the left, large white houses with long columns and graceful verandas ruled the approach to the river with mute elegance. Each house was a massive tribute to days long past. In one of the houses, drawling conspirators had planned succession from the Union. In another, Sherman himself had slept after his long march to the sea. On the other side of the town, a drawbridge crossed the river, connecting Ravenel with the 3 sea islands that separated the town from the Atlantic Ocean. A yacht knifed through the early morning water in a long green V. Seagulls, balsa light, hovered on invisible currents above the river. 3 black fishermen fished from the bridge. But Lillian Meacham was looking at the houses that bordered River Street. These are lovely, lovely houses, children. Well, you didn't tell me Ravenel was such an incredibly charming town. I wanted to surprise you, sports fans, but the big surprise is coming up later. You mean the house you rented, Dad? Ben asked. Affirmative. Why aren't we living in base housing? No one's told us that, Ben continued. Because all the quarters billeted for majors and above are filled up, Bull explained. Just means you're not high-ranked enough to get us a house, huh, Popsy? Marianne said. Of course it's not what it means, Lillian snapped. Your father will be one of the highest-ranking officers on this air base. It simply means that we'll have to wait for quarters to open up to move in. I guarantee you we won't move from these quarters I'm about to show you, Bull said proudly. Tell me about the house, Sugar. I'm still perishing from curiosity. Not until you see it. You know I'm not wild about 2-bedroom mobile homes, Dad, Ben said. Are you wild about having a fist slammed down your throat up to the elbow, wise guy? Bull bellowed. Temper, temper, Lillian cooed. Aren't these mansions lovely? Gotta go to the bathroom, Matthew said. Cross your legs, Matt, and offer it up to the Lord, Lillian said. Look at that one, Mama, Karen said, pointing to a large 2-story mansion with 10 columns on each level. It was encircled by a wild, untended garden, fierce in its reckless blooming and accidental color. This is a true southern mansion, Mrs. Meacham said reverently. It reminds me of Tara and Gone with the Wind, except for its garden. Maybe it's hard to get help around here. I guess I kind of remind you of Rhett Butler in Gone with the Wind, huh, Lillian? Bull said. Asked. No, darling, you don't even vaguely remind me of Rhett Butler. You do remind me of somebody in the movies, Dad. I can't think of who it is. No, I got it. You remind me of Bambi, Ben said. Dad reminds me of Godzilla from the movie by the same name, Marianne suggested. No, Ben said, I like Godzilla. Ask a simple question, get a lot of yapping, Bull growled. Anyway, I remind myself of Rhett Butler. A real little stud horse. It's a desecration to compare yourself to Rhett, Bull. There's no comparison. Yeah, I guess not. Old Rhett just can't measure up to the great Santini. It's not what I meant. Gone with the Wind was a real horse crap movie. It is considered the best ever made. I still have to go to the bathroom, Matt whined. Put on the brakes, Matt. You should have gone when we stopped for the train. I told you didn't have to go then, Dad. Offer it up, son, Lillian suggested for the third time. You gotta learn, Matt, Ben said, that Dad just doesn't allow his children to excrete when he's on a trip. It's a family law. I didn't think men went to the bathroom when I was a little girl, Karen added, because Dad never had to stop during a trip. We'll be there in a minute, Lillian said. Think about something else and it will help. Think about how your kidneys are going to blow up soon if you don't take a whiz. Pretty soon, Ben said. Quit the yapping back there. Before them, in two symmetrical files of stores, stood the center of town. It was a 3-block area with stores facing the street, the river visible in fragments of green through the alleyways that cut through to unseen parking lots by the water. Some of the stores were old, with graceful eaves and cornices. Others had been modernized or sterilized with plate glass windows and neon. Still others were new. In one alleyway, a large black man had parked his mule and wagon and was lifting off bunches of flowers to sell to the morning shoppers who were beginning to appear at both ends of the runny street. The hard fragrance of the salt water in the marshes filled the car. It was the smell that all of them would remember as their first smell in Ravenel. The river is beautiful, Bull, Lillian said after a moment. Look, it runs behind the stores. This town is Hicksville, said Marianne. Give it a chance, honey. You're always too quick to judge. I've given it a chance, Marianne retorted, and this town is definitely Hicksville. You could find a turd in a scoop of ice cream, Marianne, Colonel Meacham said. Where's the main part of town, Daddy? Karen asked. You're in it, sports fans. We better find a priest, Ben said. I don't think Matt's going to make it. Matt's turning yellow, Dad, Marianne said. You know, Matt, I think you look good yellow. Yeah, and you're going to look good bloody, Matt shot back, though he was moaning in a rigidly held fetal position. Are we almost to the hospital? Lillian asked. Almost, he answered. I want all you hogs to look out the window and see if you can guess which house the Great Santini rented for his family. Since the Great Santini has the worst taste in the free world, this should be easy, his wife said pleasantly. Has the Great Santini ever let his family down? Shouted Colonel Meacham. Yes, the family shouted back, pleased by this spontaneous unanimity. You do not trust the Great Santini? He asked with fake incredulity. No, the family screamed. Aha, he said, then it is up to Santini to prove his doubting Thomas family that he is the tops when it comes to choosing a house for his family. Watch out for a place that looks like a Pentagon, Marianne said, or an airplane hangar, Ben offered. Look for the one you think it is, said Bull, smiling under his sunglasses. I hope it's soon, Sugar. Matt is undergoing rigor mortis, Lillian cautioned. They had entered a neighborhood of splendid, quiet, hushed gardens and columned houses. The houses were not as spectacular as those that lined River Street, but many of them were older and more tastefully understated. The river had curved around to the boundary of this neighborhood. 4 large houses sat at the farthest extremity of this point of land, each of them overlooking the water. Each house was almost hidden by huge oak trees that hovered over them. On the far right was a large house that looked straight to the most oblique curve in the river. It was a house that needed painting, one that seemed to cry out for habitation and laughter beneath its roof. The other homes along the river were vigorously tended. This one was vacant. Bull Meacham pulled into the driveway of the house. Matt leaped from the car and sprinted to the other side of the house, the laughter of his family following him. Then, for a moment, Lily and her children sat quietly, stunned by the size and majesty of the house. Well, the last time you chose a house for the family, Lillian said, it was so small a family of fleas would have been cramped to distraction, but this, she leaned over and kissed him on the neck. It's beautiful, Sugar. No, Bull said wistfully, it's a southern mansion just like you always wanted to live in. It belongs to a man from Chicago who's going to retire here in 2 years. He heard that the Shy City kid needed a house and he got 15 big ones off the monthly rent. He knew I was class and would take good care of the house. It probably reminded him of Rhett Butler. As Lillian wandered about the empty rooms of the house, carefully making mental notes about furniture placement and room arrangement, Colonel Meacham herded his children to the front porch for a morale check. Marianne and Karen sat on the 4th step leading up to the door. Directly behind them sat Ben and Matthew. With his hands placed behind his back, Bull paced in front of them, clearing his throat and gathering his thoughts for the traditional moving day speech. The sun was fully up now, and the heat of the August day was beginning to assert itself with a blood-thickening power. Bull unzipped his flight jacket but did not take it off. In his right hand he carried a swagger stick, which occasionally he slapped against his left palm, punctuation marks for the thoughts that crowded and strutted invisibly within him. Finally he began to speak. "At ease, Hogs," he began. "I want you to listen and listen good. We have bivouacked all night and arrived at our destination, Ravenel, South Carolina, at approximately 0800 hours. 20 minutes before your commanding officer had planned. Now, I have listened to you Hogs bellyache about moving to a new town ever since I arrived home from the med cruise. This said bellyaching will end as of 08:59 hours and will not affect the morale of the squadron henceforth. Do I make myself clear?" His children nodded their agreement with expressionless eyes. The swagger stick slapped against Bull's hand in 10-second intervals. "Your CO's philosophy has always been this. If a little shit comes into your life, pretend that it's milk chocolate. It just means that you have to bear down a little bit. Reach down there in that place where the guts reside, dig in and say to yourselves, there's nothing that can keep me down. Nothing. If anyone gets in your way, you run him down. If anyone thinks they're better than you step all over him until he looks like the Grauman Chinese theater. Now, I know it's rough to leave your friends and move every year. At least it would be rough for other kids. But you," he said, his eyes meeting the eyes of every child, "you are different. You are Marine kids and can chew nails while other kids are sucking on cotton candy. Marine kids are so far ahead of other kids that it's criminal. Why? Because of discipline. You've had discipline. You may resent it now, but one day you're going to look back at your old dad and say, I owe it all to him. If he had kicked my butt a few more times, there's no telling how far I could have gone in life. You Hogs have one more advantage that I have not mentioned, but I will mention at this time. It gives you the edge even over Marine kids, and that advantage is this. You are Meachums. Now, a Meachum has got more going for him than any other animal I know. A Meachum is a thoroughbred, a winner all the way. A Meachum gets the best grades, wins the most awards, excels in sports, is the most popular, and is always found near the top no matter what endeavor he undertakes. A Meachum never gives up, never surrenders, never sticks his tail between his legs, never gets weepy, never gets his nose out of joint, and never, 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 under any circumstance, loses sight of the fact that it is the Meachum family that he represents, whose honor he is upholding. I want you Hogs to let this burg know that you're here. I want these crackers to wake up and wonder what in the hell just blew into town. Now, just one more thing. Just because a Meachum has more raw talent than anyone else, that doesn't prevent him from thinking about the man upstairs every once in a while. Yes, I think you know who I mean. Don't be proud to ask for his help. I've got this feeling when it comes to favorites with the man upstairs, the Meachums rank as high as anyone. Even I myself get down and pray to the Lord Creator every night because I realize that without him I am nothing. The order of the day is to help your mother police up the house. When I return from the base, I want to see you Hogs sweating blood. By nightfall, this camp should be in a number 1 order, inspection order. Do you read me loud and clear? Bull roared. Yes, sir, his children answered. Sergeant, Bull said to Ben, dismiss the troops. Ben walked down to his father, saluted him sharply, about-faced, and shouted, dismissed. From the veranda above them, Lillian called down to her husband, when are you going to check in at the base, sugar? Why don't I wait till Monday? I can help unpack boxes and supervise the Hogs.